Many thanks. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me well and you can see my presentation, that my screen sharing is just fine. Please let me know otherwise, Antonio.
Yes, everything is fine.
Thank you. First of all, thank the organizers for the invitation, for this opportunity to share with you some of our most recent research in a topic that is growing in terms of NLP and machine learning, but perhaps it's not so discussed, or at least so much explored in our main conferences still. And I believe that it can fit well in the scope of IberHeLT in terms of bringing or raising some arguments and some open challenges to the community. And by no means I'm trying to say that we got the right recipes or we have stable or the right paths to do what we're doing right now, which is mining the social media contents for public health informatics. But we rather like to share with you the experiences and the drawbacks and limitations we have suffered in our recent projects and how we overcome them in the best way it was possible to us back then, and meeting some of the challenges and some of the needs that Martin was talking about in terms of NLP resources, corpora for training, all sorts of tools and software for recognizing health-related relevant entities and relationships in all sorts of unstructured documents. I think Sociome brings a new level or a different level of challenges that is worth talking about. In this sense, and since Antonio did a great job in profiling my background, I'm skipping the traditional introduction of saying that I come from computer science and going more or less a main path in terms of going into biomedical text mining, but rather I'll focus on what attracts us as a research group to start working social networks as a main data source for public health informatics. All sorts of applications, from planning dissemination campaigns in terms of governmental or non-profit organizations, for non-profit organization activities of all sorts, obviously with the focus of improving individuals and community health in all sorts of ways, promoting healthy lifestyles, having a main focus in nutrition, but also in mental health, having all those areas of application in mind and being interested in working on those. One thing that was more or less for granted for a while is that people are using social media for health-related topics. Maybe not as much or not as so diverse we will think about it in the first place, but there was that acknowledgement that especially young people were very engaged, very active on social media. And these are very recent statistics. Hootsuite is one of the main platforms that generates statistics at the worldwide level every year. And what we see, regardless of the pandemics, is that statistics are always increasing. These are worldwide statistics, not just in people using, but in the level of engagement, in the level or the time spent in these platforms, meaning people not only go there, but stay there. And that reflects an information exchange that in some other more classical, more common data sources, we're not seeing so much as before. Here are some of the statistics in terms of preferred or favorite platforms nowadays. I'm skipping these for the Spanish content, which was the one that attracted us the most the last years. And of course, the numbers go down, but what we see is a growing interest. The platforms change, the ranking of platform change, which is completely normal. Every country, even in Europe or in Asia or America, typically has favorite or preferred platforms. And this is very important to know, to realize in terms of conducting social mining, because preferred platforms means like tribes of users, and we do need to know which tribes go where and talk about what. And we see here the most preferred ones in Spain, which is WhatsApp, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Okay. I'll talk a little bit later which ones are currently mineable in publicly or with less restrictions or not. But the thing was that even before COVID struck us, we saw an increasing engagement and increasing use on year-per-year basis. And in terms of health-related topics, also. So the whole point for us here is that social media is an excellent way, almost a quite new way of reaching large audiences very quickly and at a low cost. Low, it can be not so cheap depending on how sophisticated we want our software or our actions to be, say chatbots, all sorts of marketing campaigns. I mean, yes, it can cost money, but even so, it is at a much lower cost than on regular platforms. And many actions, informational and not so much, can be done without any costs apart from posting. This is one clear benefit. Another that was unprecedented in terms of health is the fact that we have unbiased reports, unbiased descriptions of individuals, personal feelings, personal experiences, opinions, what we nowadays have as a buzzword, the venting, the talking without any sorts of conditioning about each one's opinions, each one's way of looking into health conditions, into healthy lifestyles, into nutrition, mental health, all those huge topics with prevalent conditions worldwide are being discussed. And people do want to discuss, do want to share in social media, and are quite frank, quite open about it. The venting comes even in the sense they show their anger, their frustration, how flustered or limited they feel. This, in terms of health, was never seen before. We've never had such a huge, free, accessible data of these sorts, and opens all sorts of possibilities in terms of applications. And then, without looking at individuals and communities per se, we have also specialized communities in social media, such as doctors, medical professionals, nurses, sorry. And they also share their professional experiences. They also are willing to communicate with their patients or even just people that want to know about the health conditions in a very altruistic, in a very open way. So again, this paves a new way of mining about health conditions and patients and general public feelings about it that was never available for us before. So in terms of what is the leveraging of Sociome for public health informatics, promotion of healthy lifestyles comes right at the first rank of priority in terms of nutrition, preventing obesity, even in terms of mental health and association, not just with nutrition, but also with sports practice. Then we have another very strong area, which is emotional support. Patients and their relatives, their families, typically patients with chronic diseases, look into social media for support from other patients, but also from professionals and general, all sorts of people that are willing to listen to them and to offer some support, some way of cheering them up or contributing with some knowledge, some information. We see this particular one, we see a rising every year. People are more and more into this sort of sharing and this sort of emotional support. We see social media also in terms of releasing time-sensitive information. We saw it with COVID, but we see it in pretty much all the recent health crises and when some health-related hazard appears. It's very fast to reach the people using social media. And another topic that is growing interest is social inequities, to balance or to be able to reach people that sometimes are left behind in common health campaigns or cannot be reached otherwise. Social media also has a positive influence. All sorts of minorities in terms of demographics, gender-related inequities, and all those social aspects can be and are being in certain measure approached with different machine learning and NLP-based strategies nowadays. So the main focus for us in terms of applications is chronic diseases, anything in terms of diseases that it's prevalent, that people have to endure daily basis. We have some of the most common here. I'll talk a bit about diabetes, Crohn's disease, colon cancer. Those are the ones that, because we have contact with domain experts, we favor in our researches, but it's pretty much transversal to all of them, the kind of approach and the kind of analysis that we thought would be interesting to the community. Health crisis, of course, and pandemics, because of raising awareness in a very time-targeted way. It's very important. And health misinformation, which unfortunately keeps rising. And with the pandemics, things escalated even more. But we have all sorts of misinformation, not just COVID related, but also, for instance, in chronic diseases. We have much commercial and non-commercial misinformation regarding nutrition, of course, regarding mental health also. So those were topics in terms of health that we thought would be interesting for us to tackle in our research projects. So in terms of challenges and things we learned down the way as we took along project after project. The first thing is that the Sociome typically can be modeled or can be represented as a graph of people interacting among themselves, but also in terms of different sorts of perspectives, of views of interaction. Posting and replying is the most obvious way, but also we have, for instance, in terms of Twitter, retweets, which is broader dissemination of a message, mentions, being recognized by colleagues or public by professionals, or the other way around, certain doctors or certain experts to be mentioned by the general public. That's interesting. The follow concept, followers and following, which makes you more recognized, more relevant in a community as an authority in some regard. Hashtags, which is a nice way and a non-mandatory, a voluntary way of tagging topics, semantically or not so much, but at least giving some hint of the topics of concern, of interest in a given time range. So all these actions, all these ways of communicating and tagging the social interaction was kind of new. And one of the things that we more or less knew is that each platform has its own dictionary, has its own organic or dynamics, and has to be modeled differently. Now, most of the things that I'm talking with you today is about Twitter for a very specific reason. In terms of the platforms that are most used in Spain, and even in general, worldwide, we have platforms that are no longer reachable, meaning we cannot retrieve data from them unless with paid agreements, and even so, quite limited ones. So platforms like Facebook and Instagram are off-rater right now. WhatsApp, it's a platform that you can actually retrieve data from, but from very specific groups and with signed consent from each member of the group, which depending on the size and how tight is your connection to the group may not be so easy. So right now, in terms of research projects and in terms of having a moderately public access to data, we have Twitter, we have Reddit as well, which is also very nice, and a couple of them more. But we have to have in mind that restrictions are coming into place. Platforms are more worried or more strict in terms of what they know and what they allow you to use their data on. So the Twitter asks you specifically to detail as much as possible what you'll be using their data each time, and it's not so easy. Plus, in terms of not paying any fees, Twitter, for instance, only allows you to retrieve data to a maximum of 7 days before, which may represent an issue when you don't know this upfront and you want to design a whole project. Skipping retrieval issues, we have processing issues. So all the challenges that Martin was talking about in terms of and raising the need for semantic corpora gain a new meaning in terms of the Sociome. We do have language diversity, and we would love to have multi-language corpora. In many scenarios, it makes all the sense and will allow analysis of much more impact, much more knowledge inference. But aside from that, which is also a headache in itself, we have very particular issues that are very specific to the Sociome. To begin with, in most platforms, we have short-length text to deal with, which may represent an issue in most cases in terms of gaining context to actually train our software, to train our machine learning models, to train our NLP gear to actually recognize what we want to recognize, interpret things the way we want to interpret things. Then we're not talking about language formally. The idea of syntax, the idea of well-written text disappears completely in social media. We have argot, jargon, lingo, whatever you want to think about it is there. People have a very relaxed, a very unstructured and non-preoccupied way of writing, of expressing themselves. Emoticons also play a role. Many things are not said in terms of text anymore. I have abbreviations, I have expressions that are much more than idiomatic expressions, are new ways of expressing yourself in a cool way, in a modern way, if you will. But then you have many texts being replaced per emoticons. And besides knowing that that happens, the mapping is not trivial in the sense that each community, each tribe changes the way they talk, the way they use, they apply these features in their communications. And of course, we also have figures rather than text. Memes is one of the most obvious, the most immediate examples, but in terms of health, we have many misinformation cases, scenarios. We have many marketing campaigns that we all only have the image or have links, and we have to deal with that. So it's not a matter of perfecting or fine-tuning our data processing in terms of cleaning or filtering. It's a matter of looking into new ways to be able to pull information out of these new ways of structuring the communication. Then we have, or we learn down the way, that we would have other major issues in terms of demographics, characterization, and location. So these three items, age and gender, and location, are not mandatory in any of the social platforms. Users may willingly state any of them, may lie about them, or may provide no information. I mean, in terms of health, it always depends on the size and the scale and the perspective of analysis, but these are three items of information that are clearly very valuable for health informatics. So what we learned and were able to make work in our projects were certain combinations of heuristics and tools. In terms of gender recognition, there's a very famous, big worldwide database of gender name, meaning names that are more prone to be male or female. Let's look at it like that. And it's also a recognizer for the photos, the profile photos of users that works quite well. It's a neural network trained over IMDb and Wikipedia. I think I'm not wrong, which was trained there and works quite well. And with the combination of these two, giving preference to the images first and then to the names, we came across decent results in this regard. Age is not so easy. The main heuristics for age is in terms of the slang that the person uses the most, or the way they express some key aspects of their life that may denote being younger or not, but it's way more limited to PrEP. And in terms of geolocation, we have, or we may have the GPS coordinates in terms of user profile or the posts themselves. We can, by time and possible locations, guess some of them. And we have the Geo Names database, which is a free web service that we also use in this schema of trying to predict, trying to get as many probable geolocations as possible in the posts and users we are mining. Okay, so going into the projects as we went through, the first one, which is about human bowel disease, was like us testing the waters, meaning we brought to the table all the experience we had before in terms of bio-NLP, biomedical text mining, and we tried to stretch them, to make them work as much as possible in what was the novel texts, the different texts we were aiming to. So the questions of our study were very basic: the who, the what, the how, the when. Okay, the questions that typically anyone that goes mining social media data asks about, regardless of the topic. But then again, we dived into a health specific topic. We tried to use as many resources and publicly available resources and software as possible. And we relied as most as possible in medical ontologies and other semantic corpora that were available. So basically, we took a lookup entity recognition approach. With this, we were able to describe communities. We were able to find out, or to have a first approach into what were the topics of conversation, and some characterization of communication flows and user activities. So in a more graphical way, what we were interested in was to define the communities inside bowel disease, meaning from all people that were talking about or connected with some discussion about human bowel disease, we grab them, we relate them in terms of whether or not they exchange direct messages, and then we look into them to know who they were, what were their main interests, their main background, if you will. So we had bowel disease community per se, professionals and patients and known influencers in the community. We have people more specialized in nutritional, gluten-specific topics, and we had people all sorts of food and nutrition as a general topic. In terms of topic of conversations, we were centered in responses to tweets or retweets, meaning the links between notes, between topics, semantic topics, reflects that. People that posted about something and got some retweet or some reply that include also the other issue or the other topic. And we also characterize all of them in terms of sentiment, whether the relations were most likely positive, negative, or neutral, enlarging or narrowing the edges or the nodes according to the number, to the volume of posts or interactions that were occurring. So this is a very immediate, very graphical way of exposing the data. And this is particularly interesting to debate with topic experts, with people from the field that know very much about their community, that they may get surprised with some of the outputs that the patients or the general public are giving us about those topics, but they are able to read this information very simply, very naturally, and discuss it with us, which was very important. So after testing the water, basically what we did was to scale all those analyses in a more automatic and large-scale potential. For that, we took the scenario of diabetes, both types of diabetes, diabetes type 1 and type 2. We knew for conversations with experts that there should be differences in terms of the communications and even in terms of the communities, because one of the sub-communities is let's say, more drug concern than the other, but also both should present many concerns and be quite opinionated in terms of food and nutritional issues. But then again, they should show some differences. They should show different concerns or different perspectives in terms of that. So again, we took graphs as modeling approach. We took machine learning and NLP to do semantic analysis, but for instance, we got a bit more automatic and detected the communities in an automated way. So rather than drawing the frontiers within the sub-community, we did it automatically to see what sorts of groups were emerging, for instance, and also to detect influential users intra and inter-community based on their relations. And again, we took advantage of sentiment analysis and semantic resources to draw a faithful image of what were the topics of conversation. Here is another perspective, which is the hashtags that were used, which is also quite useful to understand to what extent hashtags can denote proper topics or don't offer as much information as what we would expect or desire in terms of a given problem. I'm trying to go a little bit faster because I'm probably running out of time. Gluten tolerance was our third project, and here we start looking a little bit beyond what is typical lookup dictionary entity recognition. We start putting NER machine learning based models into NER tasks. We pretty much stuck with the same kind of heuristics for gender recognition and geolocation. We introduce a new variance here, which I didn't talk about till now, which is trying to identify who are patients or patient relatives rather than general public or professional, health professional, or even organizations. So here we develop an algorithm to detect patients and to center our analysis only in conversations and communications started or engaged by patients, and run the whole analysis in these terms. And we apply...
Sorry, Anália, we should be finishing in 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay, I promise I'll finish in 1 or 2. And we apply those here, so pretty much we scaled them. And nowadays, we are conducting most of our research in terms of transformer-based deep learning methods for NERV, which are coming along quite nicely in terms of results. We use pretty much many things that are already available, BioBird and CBI Corpora and so on. But we are also training models with our own corpora in terms of food and diets and all sorts of clinical insights. And in terms of current areas of work, we are now much more focused in Spanish challenges. So taking all this experience that we gather in English-based projects here, we left the post-based analysis and we are more interested in conversation level analysis. And in terms of topics, we are centered in COVID and cancer and mental health, and stance and misinformation problems in terms of machine learning. Last but not least, I would like to introduce you our newly founded MiniStereo Project, which is focused on health misinformation. The case study is COVID. And the key thing here is that we're trying to sense, so get from social media insights, but we are also trying to act, to have active, very targeted communications back into social media to somehow curb the misinformation effects. Here are some of the people working in this project. I'm not taking too much time here. And I take my last seconds before you shut me down to thank you again, the organization. This is a wonderful workshop, I think much needed and much valuable for us working in these areas. And also thank the plan, TL, for pretty much all the resources we are planning right now to use come from their efforts from, I don't know, from the last 5 years at least. And without them, it would be really hard to conduct the kind of things we're trying to conduct nowadays. Thank you so much. And sorry for the robbery, the little robbery of time.